be growth ready, you have to be prepared to fail. That's been like kind of the benchmark of a lot of the things that I've found I've had the biggest growth from is the failures. If I wasn't uncomfortable, I was not going to succeed. When you've got nothing to lose, you've only got everything to gain. It opened a huge door for me.
When are you going to be ready to make you the priority? Hello there, it's me, Steve Meller, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. Today, former professional triathlete and four-time world champion Leanda Cave joins us to help us understand the pathway that is failure.
And I catch myself sometimes, I'm like, wow, I know where that's coming from, which I didn't before.
Leanda opens our minds to how we might better define failure, how we can better relate to each other's experience of it, and why our greatest transformation comes when we are ready to fall in love with the process of growth and let the results simply dictate where we go next. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoy listening to the Growth Ready podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, folks, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. Really looking forward to this one as we get to kind of rewind the mission of this show a little bit to when I first got started back in 2018. I loved welcoming in former athletes to provide insights around the ways in which they continue to this day to lean on the characters and the qualities and the personality traits that made them the athlete they were in their respective part of life that they find themselves now. And we get to do that to an extent with Leanda Cave today and dive into all the aspects of growth along your journey, Leanda. But before I let you go any further, I have to ask you the question that I ask everybody who comes on the show as we get started. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
I feel from the long experiences of being an athlete, to be growth ready, you have to be prepared to fail. And I could go deeper into that, but that's been like kind of the benchmark of a lot of the things that I've found I've had the biggest growth from is the failures.
Yeah, we definitely do want to go deeper into that, but I'm interested immediately just by you using a term like benchmark. It sounds as though failure becomes this measuring stick for you in some way, shape, or form. So speak more to how you maybe use failure as a way to simply establish some of these benchmarks over the years.
Well, I feel like I've had a lot of success through my career, but I feel like I never really grew from success. So when I had some really exponential growth spurts in my performance, in my racing, my results, it was all off the back of failure. So that's when I say, like, those are some of the benchmarks I find. Some of the lowest points resulted ultimately in some of the best results I had. And I'm not just sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm not just
Yeah.
saying like the failures in the sport, but like failures in life. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
just like linear and one dimensional or one silo. Like I had failures in all across many different parts of my life.
Hmm. Yeah, and the way in which failure has set you up and positioned you from you when you think back to those years in sport to begin with, what is it that you were learning through the failure that drove growth? I would assume there's a few examples, but what, just to help listeners better understand, because we hear this insight a lot, like I don't learn from the wins, I will learn from the losses, from the failures. And to help us better understand it on a more specific level for you, like what was it in those failures that was serving this next phase of growth at times?
Well, I think it comes down a little bit to what you frame failure as,
Mm-hmm.
and that could mean different things to different people or in just different circumstances. So, very early on, I I didn't succeed. I mean, I have this Australian accent, but I was actually British, and I went back to race for Great Britain, and I just failed to make like funding or like so to have support from the federation. So it just it taught me to really grind and persevere and never be settled in this comfortable space. And so I felt from very early on the most, if I wasn't uncomfortable, if I wasn't feeling that I had to work a little bit harder or go the extra mile or do something, I was not going to succeed. So I learned to kind of lean into this failure mentality when I experienced it, and just found like, okay, I'm on a good path because life's not easy.
Mm.
Which is, it sounds so like contradictory to what you think should be the formula for success, but that for me was kind of the key that kind of made the doors open.
Mm. Yeah, there's a couple things there that I definitely want to explore with you. Is that last piece there, the potential contradiction when we explain it that way? I want to go a little bit more into that. I also want to better understand how you frame and define failure, because I think this is the danger of the word, and I see this all the time in my work coaching, is that, whether it's an executive, whether it's a coach, whether it's an athlete, whatever it may be, this term failure is very blanket. It's just this blanket statement, and we hear it and we think, gosh, do I have to fall so flat on my face? Do I have to completely lose? Do I have to see a complete emptiness of some sort to define that it was in fact a failure? Or are there these teeny tiny failures all around me that are directing me towards these opportunities for growth? And so let's start there. Like when you say it, you actually said those words, like it depends how you define failure, but help us understand how you define failure.
So I guess in the context of sport, I had very big goals as a kid in sport. I mean, obviously, I think that goes along a lot of young athletes' dreams, is like to make the Olympics, right? So I wanted to make the Olympics, and there was a couple of opportunities which fell through, like didn't work out for me to make the Olympics, and that was to me a failure. And because I defined myself as being this athlete who was going to go to the Olympics, and it didn't happen. And so it was kind of like, oh, wait, I'm now not who I've kind of thought I was, or who I thought people saw me as. So that was when I really felt like a failure from my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And other failures in life, like relationship failures, that's been a big one for me. And failures in I wouldn't even say but like, again, it's in the right context, like when I went to school and I didn't finish university, or things like that. So these little things which opened up pathways for other things which wouldn't have been there if the failure had not occurred. And so that's kind of where I see the failure translating to success.
So, certainly in some capacity, our failures are, whilst obviously disappointing, and they illustrate a coming short, if you will, of the ultimate goal. At the same time, there's an opportunity for this additional pathway to be presented because of it. And even as you're talking, we caught up for just a brief moment before we got started here, sharing some timelines of our own, of my swimming career along with your career. And I'm already now, I can't help but whenever we get on this kind of conversation, I start replaying, I start rewinding some of the old tape in my mind of different moments and, opportunities where a gold medal became a silver medal, and a spot in this final became the first alternate for that final. And you look at those moments and you go, man, what if, and why couldn't that have gone a different way? And yet it's the decisions and it's the results around some of those failures sometimes that are actually presenting the next opportunities and the next pathways. What I'm trying to pick up on here in what you're saying is, how much of those failures would you say ended up defining those pathways that you eventually chose to take?
I would say all of them. And it's funny you should say, like, going back, having like some like what ifs or like regrets. And it's funny because I never had any of that. I never felt like, oh, I regret not being able to do this, or regret not being able to make that team. Or I never had that. I'm just like, okay, that's what I was saying. Like, I've just leaned into that idea as like this failure was just like a gateway for something else. It just opened up this space that didn't exist because of it. And I mean, like the cliche is like, one closed door opens another, that sort of thing. Right. So I just really found that that's the path or the life I've been leading. It's never just been one linear idea is like, oh, this is where I'm going to be. And if I don't make this my life. So it's never had that much focus on one thing.
Yeah. So let's talk more into that contradictory piece that you mentioned earlier as well. I think it's like a relatability issue too. It's like, athletes seem to understand athletes, but so those that are not athletes have a really hard time sort of sometimes being like, yeah, I get what you're saying here. And the irony of all that too is, as someone who's migrated from the world of sport into the world of corporate, the worlds aren't too different. And we're very good at like pinpointing the world that we operate in and saying like, no one can possibly understand me outside of this tiny world that I operate in, whether it be that of a triathlete, whether it be that of someone who works in finance. Like, of course, those are two different worlds, but turns out that there are things that we can learn from each. So where do you think we get this? Where do you think this contradiction comes from, and why some of what you were saying earlier can sometimes be misunderstood?
Well, I think because we have grown up in sports, so I think you learn very early on in like the idea of like losing, and that it's not always the winning race. It's sometimes a winning journey. And it's funny, I have a bunch of friends who were or are professional athletes, not just in triathlon, like yourself, swimmers. But and when we do get together and talk about these things, it's so funny how similar our conversations are. And then, in the corporate world, again, like I coach and I train some very, high net worth people. And it's funny how relatable we are, even though we're completely different. We're in different worlds and we grew up very differently. It's just that mindset. I mean, it's just like this, when you get to this pointy end, you've got there because of all this stuff you've accumulated through your life to get to this little tiny little triangle at the top. And to get there, it's kind of an accumulation of a lot of events surrounded by failures.
And we don't talk enough about the relatability piece, I guess, across all these different worlds. So I'm glad that you brought us to that, because for me, I'm also interested to get a bit more of your backstory of how you moved from the athlete into the world that you're operating in, multiple worlds I know that you're operating in now. Because transitionally, again, we don't necessarily talk too much about transitions on this podcast as well, and I think there's so much to learn from that too. But the idea of the relatability between a former world champion triathlete and that of this person in corporate America, two people who have at different times in their journeys decided that they want to reach a point, as you put it, to some extent, to reach the top of that mountain, metaphorical mountain. Where are some of those relatable pieces that you first start to identify when you work with someone in that space?
I think it often comes down to those conversations we have about the journey it took to get there. And those journeys sometimes start with nothing. And from where I started and some of these people, we've come from nothing. So you can't really go much further down than that because you've already come from nothing. So there's actually a little beauty in that. I feel like so many people are chasing everything too soon. And there's actually it's a really nice place to have nothing and start from there. And so when you've got nothing to lose, you've only got everything to gain. And when you've already come from nothing, you're not afraid to lose it again. And so you can take some higher risks. And that's what I feel is some of the common themes that when I have these conversations, that there's a certain amount of risk that we've put ourselves in front of. And I mean, that's sometimes hard for people, you know, they've already got to a point where they've got so much at stake and they're unwilling to like just, you know, move the needle a little bit in case they lose everything they've obtained or have. So that I feel like some of these people, we relate on this very fundamental level of coming from nothing.
Firstly, I absolutely adore what you just said because I've tried to explain my own perspective in a lot of different ways before, and that's a new way of hearing it. Is that there's this beauty in the nothing. There's this beauty in knowing that we came from nothing. And I've had a couple of chapters in my life where if I looked at my bank account and I looked at what I had around me in terms of relationships, there wasn't much to put in any kind of positive column. Like it just like there wasn't opportunity. There wasn't things that I needed that typically most people would be able to rely upon. I was at nothing. And the comfort that I've found in the risk that comes with growth because of that familiarity I have with nothing, I think that's so powerful for people to wrap their heads around, because to the point that I really wanted to hammer home that you just mentioned, at the end of the day, if we are so comfortable in getting to a certain level and not wanting to risk what could come next if we were to take a step or two or make a decision that was hard to make, we're really just kind of protecting that comfort, right? We're just sitting in the comfort knowing like, hey, if I don't make that step, if I don't try to commit here, then I'll be able to just stay right where I'm at. And it sounds to me like you don't necessarily relate to that way of thinking whatsoever.
No, and it's funny you should say that because I was literally having something I just wrote down last week was just literally that. I was just like, this whole idea that people have is, I mean, that's maybe a human nature, is to find the path of least resistance and just be there and make life comfortable. And but for me, I'm like, no, it's too easy. It's not meant to be this easy. It's meant to be hard because everything I've done in life has been hard. But there's always been like the result of that. And it's so easy in today's world to like also compare yourself to oh, you can hear me, right? To people and see what's going on in the social world, and everyone wants this instant gratification and validation, and they don't understand that there's like, for these people who we see who are successful, there's been like a big runway to that. They don't see the on-ramps that they had to take to get to this spot or this space. And that's where, you know, I think a lot of social media falls short. It's just like this journey. No one gets to see it and feel it and live it. It's just, there's this idea, it just happens, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I cannot my entire being wants to go into more now, this idea of the path of least resistance. And is that really what we want as human beings? Because, I'm at a point in my life where I'm a dad of a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, and whenever I just give them something, they appreciate it for just a little bit. But whenever I give them a chance to earn something, it's amazing how much more they appreciate it. And so then I look at that and I go, well, this is kind of an experiment for me in real time. I'm like, it turns out that they appreciate more what it is they have to earn. And so much of what you're saying here is that it sounds like there's been a conditioning that's taken place where a lot of us have convinced ourselves that give me the path of least resistance to get the outcome that I want. But I mean, I think you and I can both agree that the moments that we remember more than any other moment in our life as an athlete, we didn't enjoy them because it came easy. We enjoyed the crap out of that moment when we got to stand at the top of the podium, when we got to cross the finish line before anyone else, because we knew what had gone in to get us to that moment. And so I just want to kind of play in this space with you of like, do you think that we in terms of what you're exposed to, I say we can't speak for the entire planet, for crying out loud, but in terms of our environments, in terms of the world that you're operating in today, do you see more evidence that we are now being conditioned that we would prefer the path of least resistance?
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think, you're going back to what you said about parenting a 6-year-old. I think a lot of maybe, at least from my experience, there was some parenting, maybe I don't think it was intentional from my parents, but there was it was earned love. And there's a whole psychology section there that we probably couldn't get into. But I feel like for me that concept of earning something wasn't just earning results, but I had to earn my parents' love. So I would get love by performing and getting results. And so I think that kind of led a little bit into my my ability to be a successful athlete. Is just that was where I felt like I could earn something back from the public, from my friends, from my loved ones. It's always work for it and you earn it. It just doesn't come naturally or doesn't come automatically or unconditionally. So that's something to be said. So I feel there's a bit of a gray area there, because from a parent, you want your kid to have everything and be loved and but and then there's also this part of you no, what you're saying, the joy a kid or gets out of something when they earn it. So it's just the balancing act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate you acknowledging that maybe neither of us are qualified to go too deep here on the psychological standpoint, but at the same time, there's so much of what you're alluding to that I can personally speak to as well, is that you always felt in that world of athletics, you felt as though something about the victory would somehow pay off to those around you too. There was something that you were earning from outside of yourself whilst also doing it for yourself. And I have no doubt that a therapist listening to this right now is probably talking to us both, pulling us both to one side and being like, that's not the healthiest way to do it. Leanda and Steve, you probably need to find a better reason to do it than that. But, correct me if I'm wrong, because I speak from my own experience now, but the way I've kind of interpreted that and processed that over the years is to learn from that, because there's argument that there's even some failure in that, right? There's some failure in doing it for those reasons outside of yourself, and that maybe over time you can better understand that, hey, it might be healthier for you. It might be more beneficial for you in time to truly know why you want to do it and what it is you want to get out of it, so that you're doing it for those, let's say, more appropriate, right reasons, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you get older, you start to kind of understand a lot more about yourself. I didn't know that probably. I didn't even connect those dots when I was younger. I mean, it's not something that now, I see it and I'm aware. And I think that's, again, I don't have any regrets. I'm not hating on my parents for there's just things like that. And just the way we were raised, I wouldn't have done it any other way. I feel like they were given the tools that they were had as parents and did the best that they could. And we were raised how we were raised. I mean, my brother and sister, we were raised the same, and my other sister, we were all raised the same way. I ended up being the only one who's an athlete. So, you know, we were all raised rubbed off on me differently than it did on my brother and sister. So it's not like a one size fits all kind of scenario. But yeah, as I've aged and I start to recognize patterns and things and do, you know, certain work on myself and understand myself a lot better. It's quite fascinating actually, getting to learn who you are for the first time when you're in your 40s. It's really, I'm having a joy of a time just learning about all this stuff, which I never knew, you know, like these little things that you pick up as a kid, just how they translate later in life.
Mm-hmm. And I'm with you on that in the sense of I wouldn't want to go back and change anything about my journey at all. Like for me, it was nothing but a gift for me to have this sense of appreciation, as you put it, for just getting to learn about yourself the way that I get to learn about myself now, day in, day out, and through whether it be my wife, my children, whether it be through my clients, whatever it is that I'd love for you to speak to this. Maybe you relate with me on this. Is I feel as though because of my coachability as an athlete, I have so much comfort now, almost living my life with a constant mirror like around me. I'm always aware that, hey, as I'm speaking to my client, as I'm working through this with my client, in my mind, I'm like, you know what, Steve, you could stand to work a little bit on this too. Like, I don't know, how much do you notice and pick up on that?
Oh, I do all the time. It's funny. I mean, I've had a very transformative 2 years, I would say, where I really started to dive into, you know, a lot of the psychology from my childhood and these things, and I catch myself sometimes. I'm like, wow, I know where that's coming from, which I didn't before. And it's also great because then you kind of have a different compassion and understanding for other people, which I never had that really before either. So. Like I feel I've just grown, like, and I'm still growing. It's so fun, to be there and yeah, having this perception. And that's why I love meeting people and talking to people, because I get all these different mixes of personalities and some are complex and some are very simple. Some, you know, it's like really, a fun space to be in right now. The more work I do on myself that way, the more like I feel like the world's opening up and I'm seeing things for the first time.
We have to spend some time on this, because I think that the transformative piece of the last 2 years for you, I think, is a message that our listeners are always hungry to hear. You know, and that's the beauty. I get to say that to folks like yourself that come from a competitive background, an elite background, four-time world champion across various distances, right? In different triathlons. And so someone who's been the best at what they do for a pretty extensive period of time. And then to now be at a point in your life where you say, I'm not only is it time for me to transform, but I'm enjoying the transformation. I'm really enjoying the transformation. So for you, wherever you're comfortable taking us here, like what brought you to that point where you thought, hey, transformation, this is a good time, Leanda. This is a good time for me to start leaning in and saying, I might be do some work in certain areas. Like how did this transformation start for you?
Like I mentioned earlier on, I'm a really great athlete, but I'm just rubbish with relationships. So I've really had to. So after a failed relationship last year, I just had to take a step back and say, why? This is like the third, and then I start recognizing patterns, and then I start talking to, you know, therapists, and then I just start to see and understand like how these things have kind of evolved in my life. I've never, and hopefully a lot of people do this earlier than, you know, when you're in your 40s, because I feel if I had certain tools now, back then I wouldn't have made, you know, some judgmental errors in choosing a partner or, you know, within a relationship itself. But nonetheless, I'm here, and I think that was the biggest catalyst for the change was, or just trying to grow, was yeah, just a failed relationship, because I was like, I just can't keep doing this to myself. And we've talked about failure in sport, but like failure in relationships is like equally impactful on your life. And again, it opened a huge door for me, what I've been able to do in this last year. And yeah, it sucks, the relationship, the breakup, all that, it sucks. But man, I have some gratitude for it, because it's just, I'm in such a good place, which as a human, as being able to grow and see and understand things, which I never thought I needed to, like, I didn't know I needed all this. I didn't know how much I didn't know.
Right. I love that you put it that way, because two things there. Like, one, the not knowing what you don't know. I think we have to be so open to, really, the 2 points I want to make go hand in hand. Like, for you to get more comfortable with appreciating that you don't know what you don't know, and then for you also to mention on the front end that when that relationship failed, you were able to then say, I don't want this for me, or what can I do for me in order for me to get better outcomes, or for me to feel better about this moving forward. Something we speak on from time to time on this show is the selfishness, but the healthy selfish, like the healthy, like, hey, when do we want to start living this life, chasing this career, reaching this level of performance for me and only me? Like, how do I do this for me? And that's really, you talk about the other part of the growth ready question. It's like the readiness piece. When are you going to be ready to make you the priority? And I'm hearing that that's what's happened for you in the last 2 years. It's like, at some point you've said, I'm ready for me to be the focus here, and to put me under the microscope in a way like I've never done before, to hear that you've now gotten this result, right?
Yeah. And it's not a space where you kind of stay in. It's gonna, like, for me, I feel it's even evolving, like, each week. It's never gonna just be where I am now. And it's the same as an athlete. Like, you keep evolving, you keep growing, you keep learning these little things. And I guess it took me so long to get here for my personal life, because when you're an athlete, like, you're in this one lane. Yeah. And I think to be successful, you have to stay in that lane. And I see it a lot with athletes. Like, it's very hard to have and navigate a relationship while staying in your lane. Mm-hmm. Because those distractions, that time, that energy, you don't want to take it away from what you're trying to achieve. So, part of me, I mean, I had an 18-year career as a professional athlete, and that's a really long one. And in that whole time, I kind of stayed in my lane. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, part of me, I have to say, it's okay, Leanne, like, forgive yourself for, like, not doing this sooner, and learning what you needed to know and in a relationship sooner, because, like, without that, I mean, I wouldn't have had the success. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying, again, like, I think there's a lot of athletes out there that have great relationships and are in great relationships, and I'm not saying that, but for me, that was just how it worked out for me, Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I can't overemphasize enough how long an 18-year professional athlete career is, because I'm sure I could go and find this number out, but I have no doubt that the actual average length of time of a professional athlete's career is about 3 to 4 years. Because for every 18-year career, there's probably about 12 to 18-month careers. And so, like, and that's not throwing shade over anybody that hasn't lasted beyond that time. It's more about just really emphasizing the endurance that it would have taken to remain in that kind of a lane for that length of period over your time, which allows me to kind of come to this point on high performance, because no one's ever going to try to argue with you that you are someone who would, I assume, associate with this concept of being a high performer. And when you think about high performance in terms of where you are now, having gone through the career in sport that you have, having made some of these transitions in the last few years, having gone through the work that you've done on yourself in the last year or two, I'm just curious now, like when I say high performance, how does Leanda Cave in 2026 define what high performance means to her?
So I think high performance now has turned into a quest for longevity.
Hmm.
And not just the physical longevity, but the mental longevity. I mean, you certainly see as you get older, especially when you've been so reliant on having a body that's, you ask something of it and it gives you what you demand. And then now you're like, oh, wait, it's saying no. And things aren't so good, like they used to be. It's not so easy to go out and do a workout or wake up in the morning or, keep the weight down, like all these little things. And then, especially as, a woman in their 40s, like there's a lot of us out there now who are my peers, and we're all having the same discussions about hormones and perimenopause. And it's all this stuff. And the reality is it hits you sooner or later. It's like, oh yeah, we're getting old. And how are we going to live as long as we possibly can? And so we're all doing this like dive into, all these kind of, I guess, fun things like red light therapy or hormone replace, all these things to help with, longevity, like life hacks, wellness hacks that we all talk about. So the conversation shifted a lot. And that's what's really funny right now is you start having these conversations, which are so far from performance, but more in the line of like, oh, let's keep doing this so we can live longer.
Well, that's it. That's such a. I love the way you've taken us, because the performance piece of this is like, do you consider yourself still a performer of any kind? Like, do you feel as though you relate with this term, performance?
I think not in terms of getting results so much as not like the results on paper. Like I'm not like results, the physical results that I want to see at my age. That's kind of where I see myself performing. And like doing those little workouts. And that's where I feel like you have to kind of mentally still be able to push. And I thought at one point when I retired, I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to do anything hard again. I'm never going to hurt. And then all the science is saying, no, we should be doing HIIT workouts, which should be going to the gym and like lifting heavy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But then, I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump on board. And that sort of stuff is where I'm in the gym and I'm like, okay, now let's see what I can lift, or let's see how much I can squat. Like that sort of stuff. It might not be like as a result, like getting over the finish line in first or whatever, but it's kind of a different performance. Like, okay, let's see if we can keep rewinding the clock here, or at least not make it go the other way, and try and stay as fit and strong as I possibly can as I, progress through life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many words that you've used here in the last few minutes that are very process oriented. The quest for longevity, like those two, quest and longevity. Like longevity isn't really a result; it's not a destination. It's an ongoing result, if you will. And quest speaks for itself. And for you now, even leaning more into this performance piece of like the day-to-day components of how you show up and how you hold yourself accountable to different ways that you now whether treat your body, whether you train, invest in yourself, etc. I think there's so much in that answer for me to ask you what high performance means to you now. I'm personally encouraged to hear that you're able to evolve, to use one of those words you used earlier, like you've evolved now into this version of yourself where there's not such a black and white component to the outcome of high performance as there was probably when you were in that world of sport. But I don't think anyone listening to this can never hear that too much, because I think it's so important that we don't get so wrapped up in high performance as a be all end all outcome, because that's typically when we go down these paths, right, that are no longer actually serving that potential outcome.
Yeah. That's true. It's funny because I think it was at the airport. I was traveling recently and someone recognized me and they're like, oh, Leanda, what are you training for these days? And my answer was literally like, to live forever. Because I really like, that's all my goal is now. I just want to live as long as I can in a healthy body.
Mm.
I don't like seeing, I mean, we've got parents, and my mum passed last year. So, that was also adding to my year of growth. Um, and her body had broken down, and you see that. And thankfully we do get to see that as children of aging parents, and just, we get to reflect and go, I don't want to be like in the body that my parents are in. I want to have a healthier, more active, physically active body. And then also we can talk about the mind too, like not having degenerative brain diseases like Alzheimer's. So those, these sorts of things. And I want to live as long as I can in a really healthy way. I want to enjoy life in a really healthy way as we get like older. And there's the retirement age of the population isn't young, it's old. And then when you retire, I mean, I feel like a lot of people probably aren't in healthy bodies at that point, and there's not much life left to live in them. So I really feel like this, if I can encourage people to live healthier and do the right things to get there and make the right choices, I think that's a win.
I mean, if there's any call to action that comes out of our 39 minutes of talking already, it's that. You don't have to convince me. I've been convinced of this for a long time, but I don't think, again, that's another message that can never be overspoken, is the need for us to not wait until the timing's right, or that things are a little bit easier, or our routine has become more accommodating to have such opportunities to prioritize health. Like, to lead with health is to lead with longevity. And why would anybody push back against longevity? Like, why would you not want longevity? Especially when it's what I always love saying to our guests, is that we don't need to talk around these topics on this show, is that we recruit listeners who want to get encouragement on these very messages. Like, that people aren't tuning in to have an excuse to eat poorly and to sleep badly and to not take care of themselves. That's not why they're listening to the show. So for me to hear you speak to that is so encouraging for our listeners, encouraging for me. But I now want to speak more to the here and now, and where we're going from here in terms of where you find yourself today, and some of the areas that you're now trying to bring value to on a professional level. So you've alluded to some of the coaching work that you're doing right now, but at the same time, I know you've been consistently working on different areas that you can bring value in this next chapter of your life now. So what does growth look like for you now moving forwards on a more professional basis?
Well, professionally, I mean, as you can see, I have my Best Buddies shirt on. Yeah. I work for a charity, and I always have had a philanthropic side of me. I think I've been supporting charities for, well over 20 years, from Louis Gehrig's disease, cancer, Best Buddies, which is individuals with intellectual and developmental diseases. So, and I've been involved with this charity for 13 years, and now I'm actually working for them. So that's one of my big things. And I think, we look at longevity in sometimes in just a physical sense, but I think when you give and you help others, it's like that brings longevity too, because you have purpose. If you don't have purpose in life, I feel then you're kind of you don't have the direction. Like, why would you want to keep living if there's no purpose? So it helps find purpose. And then it helps find that community. It helps find friends. You get all this stuff all in one. Like, it's such a great thing being able to give back. So that's been a big part of, the next chapter. I call it Leanda 2.0 now, because I'm not an athlete anymore. And then I also, I did a TEDx talk, my first one, a couple of weeks back, and oh my gosh, I loved it. It was my first one, so I stumbled a little bit, but I just loved putting the message together. I love being able to talk and inspire and share my journey with people. And this is, for young people. It was a university, so they're just like at the right, ready and picking age where, life's still a big oyster to them. And it's so exciting for them. And I really felt like I I had some really, really strong message to give them. So that was something I want to do more of. And yeah, the coaching stuff, I feel like it's part of my DNA. I mean, I can't do the performance side myself anymore, but being able to help others reach their goals and to get them, again, like might not just be performance, but it might be to be healthier, to be a better version of themselves, like all that stuff. So for me, that is really, so it's like these three silos I'm trying to, I'm not so much in one lane anymore. I'm kind of like doing all the things. And then, you know, my project of working on myself is also a big part of the who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you added that piece at the end too, that you consider yourself part of the professional project. Like that's that we don't hear that enough. Like it's so easy to make that this separate compartment over here, and it's just like when I have the time, I'll do the workout. When I have the time, I'll make time for philanthropic endeavors, whatever it might be. And yet you're bringing it into one of now 4 lanes that you're operating in on a professional basis. I have to go to the TEDx because I would like to think that it's going to be coming out later this year on some platform of some kind. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what was it on? I want to hear what it was. What was it about?
So my title was "Failure is the Force That Shapes You," which, you know, considering how like what we almost, you can see why that's such a natural topic for me to dive into.
Absolutely. And so the part of this that I'm so encouraged by, that I want everyone to hear, is that you said your first TEDx. You didn't have to say that. A lot of people will say, I did a TEDx, and that's it. You said first TEDx. And so that makes me think that you might want to try it again.
Oh, I'm ready. I feel these are why, you know, when I mentioned like something that I'd written down and thought about earlier, just, you know, the concept of like being uncomfortable is where you should feel comfortable. When you're comfortable, and it's, you know, you're not going to progress. And so that is probably going to be the topic for my next one, because yeah, I really feel like I've lived, like, it's so funny. People say life is so short, and I'm like, gosh, life is really long. I've like had so many lives within my life, and I feel like there's so much life I have to live. And so yeah, I feel like I've got these little nuggets that I want to share, and that I feel like I could put into another really great TEDx talk.
Well, what I'm hearing throughout this conversation is that when we are more comfortable, more familiar with failure, we actually get to use it more as this force in our life, that really at the heart of it, it should help us see that never should we be operating in a singular lane. Never should we be looking at ourselves through some sort of singular perspective, that we have the opportunity to look at all these different opportunities and paths and doors that are right there in front of us because of the force of failure that is presented to us. But at the same time, to be able to get to a point in life where you can say, hey, if I were to approach life this way, that there is an argument to be made that this thing that we get to experience is not as short as we may claim sometimes. And that might be a little bit of a protection muscle that we're using there. And if we really embrace the idea of failure and we open up enough doors, there's so many potential chapters, there's so many potential opportunities right here in front of us that we can say, hey, at any point I can turn this next page and a whole nother chapter is presented to me, simply because I was willing to listen to this idea of what failure could do for me moving forwards. We hear about failure so much on this show. You framed it ever so slightly differently for me today, and I'm always looking for that. Like if people answer this question I ask at the front similarly from one episode to the next, that's okay. But can we find contextually what that word means to you and why it means that to you, based on your specific journey? And so, Leanda, for all of this, I'm so grateful. And before I let you go, if we were to want to learn more about Leanda Cave, and maybe she's working on a number of different things right now, whatever it might be, where might we go to learn more about you?
I think the most active platform is Instagram. Just at Leanda Cave, or at Leanda Cave Coaching is another one I have. They're typically where I put everything out that's happening in my world. I have a website, but it's not as, you know, updated as obviously day to day as what Instagram is. So yeah, so that's where I'd recommend people find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that information under the show notes for everybody to be able to access you. In the meantime, though, I'm so grateful for you coming on. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to learn from you, and at the same time, just wishing you luck in these many, many lanes of life now that you're trying to achieve high performance in. So just thanks again, Leanda, for the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.